The wind howled through the craggy hills of rural Ireland, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and the distant roar of the Atlantic. I had rented a remote cottage nestled between the heather and bramble, a place where the townsfolk whispered tales of spirits and long-forgotten legends. My goal was to escape the chaos of my life back in America, to isolate myself and finally finish my novel. I had envisioned solitude, inspiration pouring from the sky like the rain that fell incessantly, but what I found instead was something far more sinister. The cottage was small, its stone walls thick and cold, much like the demeanor of the locals. They regarded me with a mix of curiosity and wariness as I arrived, their eyes flickering with something I couldn't quite place. It was only when I inquired about the famed Banshee that they turned their backs, muttering a string of Gaelic that felt heavy with foreboding. "Ah, don't mind them," I said to myself, chuckling at the absurdity of it all. "Just folklore." I settled into the musty cottage, the air thick with the scent of old wood and mildew. My laptop hummed to life as I began to type, the words flowing at first, but soon the screen turned blurry and the cursor blinked in defiance. Every night I heard the wind whistle through the cracks in the walls, a haunting melody that seeped into my dreams. I tried to shake it off, tried to immerse myself in the narrative I was crafting, but the tales of the Banshee lingered like a shadow in the back of my mind. They said she was a harbinger of death, a spirit who screamed to warn of impending doom. "Just stories," I muttered as I poured myself another cup of tea. But as the nights wore on, I began to feel her presence creeping closer, like a fog rolling in from the sea, thick and suffocating. One evening, as I sat near the fireplace with a glass of whiskey, I decided to take a walk in the moonlight. The air was crisp, and the stars twinkled like distant lanterns. I wandered through the fields, the grass brushing against my legs, and for a moment I felt a sense of calm. That is, until I heard it. A distant wail that pierced through the stillness, echoing across the hills. My heart raced as I turned back to the cottage, the warmth of the fire drawing me in like a moth to a flame. The locals had warned me, hadn't they? I recalled the old man at the pub, his eyes glazed over with drink. "If you hear her cry, it's too late, she's come for you." I shook my head, banishing the thought. "It's just the wind," I reassured myself. But the sound echoed again, closer this time, and I could feel the chill seep into my bones. The next morning I awoke with a sense of dread hanging heavily in the air. I could not shake the feeling that something was watching me, lurking just beyond the threshold of my perception. I forced myself to sit at the desk and write, but the words eluded me, slipping through my fingers like grains of sand. Frustrated, I decided to venture into the nearby village to gather supplies. The locals were as tight-lipped as ever, their eyes darting away whenever I approached. I stopped at a small market, hoping to engage in conversation, but the shopkeeper merely offered me a nod before retreating into the back room, leaving me alone among stale bread and canned goods. I stumbled across an old woman sitting by the fire in a small cafe, her gnarled hands gripping a steaming cup of tea. I approached her cautiously, desperation clawing at my throat. "Excuse me, ma'am, can you tell me about the Banshee?" Her eyes widened and she leaned closer, her voice low and trembling. "You shouldn't be asking about her. She can hear you. She's always listening." I scoffed, rolling my eyes. "It's just a story, right? I'm an American novelist. I write fiction." "Fiction," she hissed, her voice rising in a crescendo that sent a shiver down my spine. "You think that's all it is? You don't know what you're inviting. If she knows you're here, she'll come for you." I laughed nervously, but it felt hollow. "Then I'll just have to finish my book before she does," I said, forcing a grin. As I returned to the cottage, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the fields. The cries of the Banshee echoed through my mind, a relentless reminder of the weight of the stories I had dismissed. That night, I tried to write, the words flowing like blood from an open wound. The tension in the air thickened, the shadows creeping closer, whispering secrets I didn't want to hear. I felt the heaviness press against my chest as I typed, the screen flickering ominously. I glanced outside, my heart racing as I saw her, a pale figure standing at the edge of the field, hair swirling in the wind, mouth agape in a silent scream. I jumped back, panic surging through me. This isn't happening, I whispered to myself, the revelation settling in like a cold hand on my shoulder. I grabbed my phone, desperately dialing the local pub. Maybe someone could help. Maybe they could explain what was happening. But the line rang and rang, unanswered. The wailing came again, louder this time, gnawing at the edges of my sanity. I bolted from the cottage, driven by an instinctual urge to escape. The night was alive with the sound of her cries, and I stumbled through the fields, the ground slippery beneath my feet. As I ran, I could feel the chill of her presence wrapping around me, tightening like a noose. The wail morphed into a cacophony of voices, each one pleading, begging for release. I fell to the ground, hands clawing at the earth, desperation clawing at my throat. "Leave me alone!" I screamed into the void, but the only response was the echo of my own voice, swallowed by the night. I crawled toward the old well at the edge of the property, the cold stone walls looming like a grave marker. I peered into the darkness, hoping for a glimpse of salvation, but all I saw was my own reflection, twisted and distorted. "Please," I cried, my voice breaking. "I just wanted to write." But the Banshee was there, her form materializing from the shadows, her face a mask of sorrow and rage. "You took their stories," she hissed, her voice a chorus of the damned. "Now you must pay the price." I stumbled back, but there was nowhere to run. The air crackled with energy, and I felt the life force draining from me, pulled into the vortex of her wail. "You wanted solitude," she continued, her voice echoing with the agony of countless souls. "Now you'll be one of them, forever trapped in your own tale of despair." In that moment I understood the truth. The stories I had dismissed were more than mere folklore. They were a warning. The Banshee wasn't just a spirit. She was a collector of souls, and I was her latest victim. As the darkness closed in, I realized the ultimate irony. I had come to this remote cottage seeking inspiration, only to become part of the very legend I had sought to exploit. My screams joined the chorus of the damned, echoing through the hills, a haunting reminder that some stories are meant to be left untold. And as the last vestiges of my sanity slipped away, the night swallowed my cries, leaving nothing but silence in the wake of my despair, a fitting end for a man who thought he could control the darkness.